Welcome to this week's Bitshares DEV Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all Bitshares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our Hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the Bitshares ecosystem and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Today is Friday, May 15th, 2015. This is another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout with Bytemaster from Bitshares, who joins the Bitshares community on a weekly basis to be as open and transparent about the development process as possible. Many people have been wondering lately what is going on behind the scenes. It is almost as though the developers have left GitHub for the community members who watch the progress there. For obvious reasons, this has caused a little bit of concern. But today, Bytemaster gave us his time to explain some of the basics behind why they've been seemingly absent from GitHub. Quote, 17,000 new lines of code, unquote, was the message he brought. And I'm certain everyone will want to listen to the details. Let's let him give them to us. Bytemaster, if you would like to go ahead and start with any updates, and then we can get into community questions.
We have no real updates that we're ready to disclose at this point in time, other than the fact that the team is working harder than ever, producing more than ever. I think there's been some really good questions asked this week. I guess I can start by addressing some of the questions directly, and then we can go on to any other questions you all may have.
Sounds good. What we'll do then, I could go in line, but I think this kind of piggybacks pretty well on your statement. And it's from Lion Danny. It says here, I noticed that your contributions to the Bitshares project lately, as in after February, are the minimum I could ever personally imagine. Have you not the free time? Are you working on something else? Maybe focused on notes like Toast is doing? If so, don't you think it's unfair for Bitshares investors, especially after this merger thing and the promise the core devs would all focus more on Bitshares and not less, and not to other chains like Notes? Or is there another merger in the plan? Sorry if I'm missing something. I really hope that that is not the case.
I'd like to start by saying that we have no intention of increasing the maximum supply from about 3.7 billion or increasing the rate of issuance from 5 BTS per second. Those parameters of the system are untouchable, and we remain committed to that. Second, the entire team has been doing nothing but work on Bitshares. We are just not doing this work in public. We are preparing a whole lot of documentation to describe everything that we've been working on, to answer everyone's questions, and we plan on announcing and releasing all this new information in the first part of June. I made a post on the forum to describe, the magnitude of what we've been doing behind the scenes. We have added over 17,000 lines of C++ in our private repository. These are lines of code that do not exist in the public repository. To put that in perspective, there are 17,000 lines of code in the core blockchain library that define Bitshares. So we have done more in the past 3 months than we produced in the 9 months before that. So the dev team has been working harder than ever on Bitshares. Bitshares is about to get a major game-changing update in its feature set and performance. And we're very excited about what that's going to be. But we can't reveal the details at this time.
Gotcha. I guess this would be another question then that piggybacks on your answer here. Wyatt Danny follows up by saying, thanks for the clarification. P.S. Imagine when active community members have questions, concerns, and doubts like this. What is the case for first-time visitors and investors when they check the GitHub? Perhaps that we could stick to your answer or quote somewhere with great visibility. Perhaps a sticky on the forum page or something to that effect. What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't. Sorry, I was trying to get to his response on the thing, and I was reading that while you were talking, and I completely missed what you were saying.
It's okay. It pretty much mirrors what he said, maybe slight difference.
Yeah, so I think it would be a good idea to put a note somewhere in GitHub or on the forum that we are working on something like this. We are so close to having it out, though, that you're all going to know exactly what we've been up to shortly, and all your questions will be answered.
Now, this is someplace that I would like to ask my own question, and of course, true to form, everybody is more than welcome to ask their own questions. But my question actually has to do with this a little bit. There's a reason why you've kind of done this off of GitHub, and it hasn't been quite as open. And I'm assuming that would be partially for the sake of not giving any potential competition a leg up. Would that be the case?
Oh, there's a lot of factors involved. One is competition. The other is we wanted to be extremely focused and not have a whole bunch of backseat drivers telling us which way to go while we figure things out. And there was a lot of thinking that had to go into coming up with a final solution. We've learned in the past that publicly airing all of this thinking scares a lot of people. Granted, it has to be weighed against the fear or uncertainty associated with not knowing what's going on. But I would say that in general, the process has been good, and the end result has been something that is better for the BitShare holders, in our opinion. I think that some of the intermediate results of where we were at different points in time could have upset some of the people out there because we didn't have all the solutions, and we were trying to find solutions to different things. And not all those intermediary solutions would have been appealing. But what we ultimately came up with allows us to maintain our goal of no dilution or no changes in supply, no more mergers, any of those things that people are worried about. We wanted to avoid those type of things, and we've managed to do that, and we're very happy about that. So there's that, and we have been discussing some of what we've been working on the forum, BitAssets 2.0, for example. We've mentioned the referral system and paid workers and the worker delegate witness divide. Those have all been discussed on the forum, and those are part of what we've been working on, but those just scratch the surface.
Sure. Ben Mason, from the forums is asking, after the launch of this latest round of changes, will you be able to commit to and publish a roadmap to 1.0?
I just wrote a roadmap in the documentation yesterday.
So, Ben, you have your answer to that question. Number 2 that he asks here is, how do you feel about the recent work being done and the present state of the BitShares ecosystem, personally?
I think the BitShares ecosystem is stronger than ever. Every day I talk to people that are doing stuff, that are interested in things. Our community is unique as far as I can tell. We've got really smart people that have really strong commitment to our philosophy. And I think it unites a lot of the people that are trying to build on BitShares. It's the philosophy and the role of freedom and all the things that I've expressed. It's really built a community of people that have a lot in common, and it's something that binds us far more than just whatever the share price happens to be on any given day. And that is going to bring us through the fire. There's the trough of sorrow where you don't know what's going to happen before you finally take off. And I think that's where we are right now, is there's uncertainty, but we're all working each and every day to add value to this ecosystem. I will say that if you are actively working on stuff for BitShares, there's going to be significant API changes coming. And you should contact us, let us know what you're doing, and we'll help you get prepared for those API changes.
Do the current exchanges that hold BitShares know about this change, to your knowledge?
No.
Okay, so it might be a good idea for us to reach out to them.
We are reaching out to the exchanges once all the documentation is complete. We want to reaching out before all the documentation is complete, waste our time and their time.
Sure, fair enough. Well, I'm just going to go down these lines of questions because you're right, they are all good. 3 from Ben Mason is, can you give an update on the possibility of peer tracks using BitShares blockchain? And we talked a little about this in a past Hangout, but we didn't really get too deep. And I don't think that you really had any updates past the information that you gave us. Has that changed at all?
No updates at this point in time.
And here's another one that's re-emerging. Do you believe that Follow My Vote will deliver the value you originally believed it would when retaining the project and team for BitShares?
Adam is in the office every single day. He's bringing us business contacts. He is reaching out to Pirate Party and is getting a lot of inroads there. He is going to be building on the BitShares platform. These things always take longer than we would like, but I believe he is a valuable member of the team and that we will see the value from it.
This is a kind of a question that's been on my mind too, because he received approximately 30 million BTS, I believe, during the original merger. And that's been something that a lot of the community has asked questions about. Do you know the current state of those 30 million BTS? Have they been moved, accessed at all, or do you know anything about that, or do we need to reach out to Adam?
They haven't been moved, and they are vesting, so the vast majority of them can't be moved.
Okay, and do you know if there are any plans on Follow My Vote share dropping like Peer Tracks has, or is that kind of no longer in the equation?
They are not having their own blockchain. Anything they do will be on the BitShares blockchain.
So would that be an answer that would say that you do not think that they are going to be share dropping, or that you believe they will be?
I'm saying they don't have anything to share drop. They're not going to be releasing their own chain.
So they won't have their own tokens either?
Correct. There will be no Follow My Vote tokens.
Oh, so it'll use BitShares directly?
Yes.
That, I think, clarifies a lot for people. At least for me, it does. All right, so I'm going to stop for one moment. Does anybody else have any questions regarding anything that we've talked to up to this point?
I do. I have a question about itBit and whether or not that's going to be involved in anything that we're doing going forward.
Could you tell me a little bit about it?
I thought you were privy to it. itBit is it's basically, I might not be the most qualified to answer this question, but basically, as I see it, as I've researched it, it is a group of very much banker insiders that have formed a company, a startup company, I guess, to further the cause of blockchain for their ends. And the people that are involved with itBit are a lot of the heavy hitters in mainstream finance, and it gives me the willies to think that they're going to be involved with us.
I think it would be great to be involved with them. I have not had any conversation with them at this point in time.
You think it would be great to be involved with them? That counters what you were saying earlier about the philosophy of BitShares, in my view.
Well, their philosophy of BitShares is flexibility, and one of the things we're working toward is allowing user-issued assets to be regulatory compliant. And if we can have the regulatory, completely legitimate uses while still maintaining our freedoms on one platform, I think that's the best of both worlds. So I haven't looked at their exact details. I look at their website and I see they've raised $25 million and they're working on all kinds of redefining regulation. So I think we have a lot to offer them as far as steering that regulation. But I do not want to be in the mode of handing over the keys to the kingdom to complete control. We need to maintain our blockchain that's free, with funds that can't be seized, and with no requirement to identify yourself. As long as we maintain those things and the system is not censoring transactions because we're decentralized, we can stick to our principles. But I think that a free market needs a web of trust, if you will, to allow people to know who they're doing business with, to restrict assets. There's a whole market out there that we can't tap without some form of self-regulation, and that's where we need to go.
That's reassuring. Thank you for that answer. Also, I don't think you can really answer this, but if we do go forward with any type of venture capital to get us past any kind of reduction in our market cap, I hope that you won't give the kingdom away to them either. And venture capitalists obviously always want more and more of the company. So retaining those principles that you just described of freedom, yes, I recognize the need for compromise in terms of opening up to regulatory influences, but we can't cross the line and dismantle the freedom that founded the basis of BitShares in the first place. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. If there was going to be anyone that's using the BitShares technology to go that route, then they'd have to create a new chain to do so. And the BitShares chain would be the one that has all the freedom.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's a very solid answer. I like that answer. So things like reputation systems and other things are part of the self-regulation, I think, that you're alluding to, and I'm all for that type of thing. And that should be a voluntary thing, how much you want to get involved with that identity, that sense of identification, how strongly you want to tie your real-world identity to your BitShares account. That should be voluntary, and as long as we maintain that, I'll be pretty happy.
This is a place that I've thought a lot about it, because part of me has thought, why would we let these current institutions that have caused so many problems kind of, bring the beer to the party, so to speak? You know what I mean? Why would we let them control everything? And the one thing that I've had to realize, I think partially the hard way, is that blockchain technology, if we use it correctly and if it's implemented correctly, it can enable a very high level of transparency for the government servants and institutions that are in place that are supposed to be there for the people, as opposed to ruling over them, right? And it seems like that would enable a new era of the public being able to really police the current institutions in place, which means that no more national security keeping us from being able to read the Trans-Pacific Partnership and things like that, right? These things would be, or at least the evidence of what they're doing behind the scenes would be available via the blockchain through their interactions and the metadata that we could capture from that, right? I mean, where do you stand on that, Bytemaster? Or can you talk about it?
I don't think I have anything to add that I haven't already stated.
Fuzzy, one thing you got to realize is that the people that have that level of power are not going to relinquish it easily. And if they could be made to use our blockchain and be fully transparent, then I think it would be a better, beneficial world. But they won't do that willingly. If blockchain technology becomes the predominant standard of the world finances, then they will find some way to create a dark chain or something that will keep their books and their activities hidden. That's how I see it. But as far as we're concerned, the average person, the people that the rulers are ruling currently, if their stuff is 100% transparent, then they can easily just tax us and oppress us the same way they do now with the reporting and the taxing system that exists now. So that's why I think some form of anonymity or some form of obfuscation of identity is also important. There are issues that we need to have transparency and reputation and known identities when you're transacting business. So that's also true. Bytemaster has explained this fully in many posts he's made in his blog. So I don't see any ambiguity there. It's a struggle to figure out where the balance of those things are, though. That's the key thing.
The thing about the powers that be, they have access to millions, hundreds of millions of users. And they are not going to build on a blockchain technology that would enrich, the 10,000 people in the Bitshares ecosystem when they could start from scratch and gain a much larger percentage for themselves.
Exactly.
And that's just the reality. And Bitshares would have some options there to potentially be included if they supported dilution. But you would probably have to dilute 10 to 1, right? Bitshares gets 10%, and these guys get 90%. In order for them to bring it mass market, we'd probably still win financially, but I don't think anyone in the Bitshares community is prepared for that kind of thing. And so that leaves us with the, we have to go and get the network effect. And that is why we put so much effort into coming up with a referral system that can get us there. And this really has to be a grassroots thing. And from a grassroots perspective, you're going to have slower growth than you can with a corporate top-down, partner with everything, have, every TV show mention, Twitter and Facebook. How come those websites get mentioned everywhere, right? It's because their management team had inside connections to negotiate deals with all of these things, and it's just self-reinforcing. And we can't compete against a banking system that's trying to do that, or a government that is trying to promote an alternative system. And the governments and the big bankers, they know this. They know that grassroots has a huge uphill battle, and that they don't have to honor the grassroots at all when they finally do move into the space. So, we're trying our best to make Bitshares a platform that can have large network effect with partnerships with banks by being regulatory compliant where possible, and while simultaneously motivating the massive grassroots effort. But I think it's important that we are realistic about what it is we're trying to do and why we're trying to do this. If we lose sight of why we are trying to do this, then it just becomes a matter of dollars and cents, and you go off and you end up compromising all your other principles just for the money.
And that's my biggest concern. So I'm really glad that you're on that same page. Now I'd like, if it's all right with Fuzzy, I'd like to talk a little bit about the delegate worker split proposal that you've got out there, and the rationale that you have for the way that you split them. And you mentioned in the forum that you don't think it will be a disruption, or you think it'll be a smooth transition from the existing delegate scheme to the new one. And I'd like to see understand why you think that it would be so smooth when it seems so radically different from my perspective.
All right, so let's talk about the new scheme real quick. There are 3 different roles. We've got witnesses. These are the block producers. They get paid per block a fixed deterministic amount. It can be changed, but every block is the same amount, and it doesn't change very often. And they don't have any other control or influence on the system other than to produce blocks on their scheduled slot.
The ones that will be running the actual delegate software to do the block production?
Yeah. So witnesses do all block productions. They are the full nodes. They are what we think of delegates today. They are the 3% delegates. Okay. Whether or not they produce price feeds is an option, but they're doing the bare minimum work. And I chose the word witness very, very carefully because I wanted to, from a regulatory sense, make sure that this particular role is doing nothing other than observing and certifying that this is the order in which transactions occurred. I do not want the witnesses to have any regulatory exposure. I don't want them to be called miners or to have new currency issued to them, because if those are all create regulatory things. I don't want them to have any control over things like transaction fees or properties or even price fees, because that gets them closer to the role of administrators or money transmitters or any of these other regulatory terms. But being a witness, it's like eyewitness. You're just testifying that yes, this is the block. These are transactions. I saw this thing. You're a time stamping service. That's all you're doing, and you're getting paid to run a server that's doing this stuff. Those are very clear, legally unambiguous roles, and so that's the witness role.
That makes sense. Now, you say that they're paid to produce the blocks or to run the nodes. That makes sense also. But now, the way you described it on the forum is the only pay they will receive is basically reimbursement for server costs, no compensation for their time and efforts to maintain the node, keep it updated, and all that kind of thing.
No, it's the time and materials.
Time and materials.
Yes, they're compensated for their server costs and their time in maintaining the server, but they are not paid to do other tasks, whether it's promoting the blockchain, marketing, or developing new software. It's purely an admin role. But their time needs to be compensated. No one works for free.
Okay, very good. That's the biggest concern that I had, because that's how I saw it being portrayed, as just simply basically server costs. So if it's more than that, if they're compensated for their administrative role there just to maintain the node, the technical aspect, then that's fine with me too.
Okay, so we've identified the witness role. Now I'd like to talk about the delegate role. Delegates are going to cease to do anything with block production, and instead they've got only one power. They can set the transaction fees and blockchain parameters. Actually, they can't set that power. They can propose to change those parameters, and the shareholders have to reject the proposal, or the proposal takes effect. So if we need to adjust transaction fees, block intervals, or witness compensation, or any other parameter, block sizes, any of these things that are currently hard-coded into Bitshares, then the delegates can propose that they get changed, and if the delegates aren't voted out after they make the proposal, then the change takes effect. That does two things. One, the delegates don't actually have any control. All control rests in the hands of the users. And if you want to be clear from a regulatory perspective, we need all decision-making control to be in the hands of the individual users, not in the hands of some elite or some managers and administrators. So that's the role of delegates. They're sort of the decision-making committee, if you will, for evaluating all the proposals and figuring out how to weigh the pros and cons of tuning the blockchain parameters. And then the third class is the worker. A worker is paid on a daily basis, and they specify how much money they need to be paid each day, and they are elected by the stakeholders, just like the witnesses are elected and just like the delegates are elected. And then each day there is a budget, and the budget is based upon the 5 BitShares per second times number of seconds per day. So something like 400,000 BitShares in the daily budget. And each day we go through all the workers from the most approved to the least approved, and we pay out of the budget until the budget's gone, and when the budget's gone, no more workers are paid. Now that would imply that we'd be spending every penny that we're authorized, except for the fact that the stakeholders can also vote for a worker that just refunds the money. And if those workers are the highest paid, then there is no dilution, or most approved. And so stakeholders now have control over workers. Workers aren't fixed to a particular budget. Workers have no control over the blockchain. They don't get to set or propose things. They don't get to produce blocks. They're just paid positions to do stuff on behalf of the stakeholders. So that means workers are also free and clear from a regulatory perspective. So if you put all these roles into a single entity like we currently have with delegates, then you have a system where the delegates could be considered the administrators of the system and have a regulatory component associated with it. But by dividing it up like I've just described, we have a membership organization where it's in complete control of the members, which are us, the stakeholders. And the system gives us more flexibility in worker pay, gives us more flexibility on setting blockchain parameters and fees, and it simplifies the role of the administrators, which don't get involved in the politics.
Sounds good. Now, in terms of transitioning, it seems to me that being that there's such a radical difference between the old and the new systems, that there needs to be some form of transition where everybody will be migrated into being one of these 3 roles. So I can see a lot of campaigning and a lot of flurry of activity. And what do you think about that, Bytemaster?
My plan for migrating is that all existing delegates will be given 2 roles, a worker and a witness. And the worker will pay them at the current pay rate, and the witness will pay them at the other rate. And so at the end of the day, the workers and the witnesses will be very similar to the current delegate structure until votes start shifting. And then you'll see changes. But until then, like today we don't even have a role of setting blockchain parameters. The developer does today. And that's going to change in the future.
You're doing essentially a separation of powers.
Yes, it's decentralization through separation of powers versus decentralization through pure numbers. And that, I think, is an important distinction.
Well, and it really goes back to the basics of what the founders of our country, America, really thought about. So it's a very interesting take on how you're planning on this. Tom, did you have something else to say? Sorry about that. Just wanted to
I'll let Jenso have his question in there.
Yeah, you talked about empowering the shareholders and kind of giving them control. How do you plan to do this when we currently don't have any voting system implemented?
Well, we do have a voting system implemented. What do you mean?
Within the client, how would we, aside from voting on delegates, how would we vote for particular proposals? We can't really do anything at this point other than vote on particular delegates. Will this, under this new style system, will we be able to vote on specific issues?
Under the new system, you can create a worker that has no pay and is a proxy for voting for approval of any concept you like. There's no longer a restriction on the number of things that you can vote for.
It sounds like it might just be kind of a continuation as far as voting goes of the current system, where we are voting for, delegates, and we then hold the delegates kind of accountable for hopefully, like politicians, implementing what we want.
At the end of the day, my goal would be all hard forks depend upon a proxy worker getting voted in to take effect. But as far as implementing the hard fork, you can have a worker that represents the desire to have that feature, and they get voted in before anyone even starts working on it. Otherwise, what's the point of implementing a feature if you can't get stakeholder approval to hard fork it in? But that's the goal.
This is a good place to ask. How do you foresee the voting looking? Is it going to be the same type of voting that we do on delegates, or is it going to be a system where I come out and I say, here we're going to share drop 100% of these user issued assets. So we want to see if you guys send to this address, it's a yes. If you send to this address, it's a no. Is it going to be something like that? Something like that?
It'll be stake voting.
So it'll be done directly from within the client.
Correct.
So this would mean, and there's a reason I'm getting into this, because Estefan TT, he's only got 50 posts on here on our forums, but it seems like he's been working on something behind the scenes for quite some time for the French community in Bitshares. And this is what he has to say. The future of the salary of delegates with the reforms of paid workers and referral program is very fuzzy. We build a website aiming to inform French people about Bitshares, keep them in touch with the updates, and create a strong French community. Build it, add a forum, translate 101 Bitshares, and some articles was only the tip of the iceberg for our project. We made it with free time and private funds, but to move to the project further, we would need some more funds. And he says here, the website is bitsharesfcx.com, and he says, what would be the most time-effective way to collect some funds in a monthly base to fuel the project? And isn't it risky to invest the time and money to begin a delegate when we could finally reach the goal, having a reform where the delegate only signs blocks? So what you were saying is essentially that Estefan would come out, would say, this is what we've been doing. Here, look at it. This is what it's costing us, and we would like to have this and maybe a little bit extra for our time and effort put in. This is what the amount that we would estimate per day needing, and then the stakeholders can vote yes or no.
Yeah, not only just the amount per day, but also a window of time during which they can get paid, a start and an end date, so that the stakeholders know if you vote them in, that they're not going to sit there collecting after they're done with their work, or if they don't do anything. There's a fixed budget for them. Under the new system, though, with the referral program, if you create a French website that is attracting French users, and you start signing up a lot of users, that's an entirely open market. We're not able to compete in that. We don't have a French version of our website. And so all the French users you'd sign up will earn you income from the system directly proportional to your success in signing up French users. And I think as stakeholders, we need to ask ourselves, what is the value of each user we sign up? And that value needs to be to what extent can we monetize each user that we sign up? If you can't monetize a user, then we're losing money. So every user that comes into the system, every time they do a transaction or make a trade, they're earning us income. That's how we monetize them. So we need to make sure that the cost of acquiring the user is always less than the lifetime monetization of the user. And the more efficient we are at acquiring users, the higher our profit margins can be. Now, I've estimated that the lifetime value of a customer is at least $100. It's probably closer to $1,000. We'll keep it really simple, it's at least $100. Which means that each user you bring into the system, you can get paid $100 if they stay with the system and they actually use it. If you just bring them up, they sign up, they create an account, and then they disappear and don't use it anymore, well, then you didn't fully monetize them. So the referral system is really designed to help people like these French people to make money directly proportional from their effort without having to ask permission from anyone, without having to convince anyone but themselves that they can bring value to the BitShares system. And I think that that is going to be the primary way that I recommend things like that get funded. If you do go to the BitShares shareholders and ask for a worker position, there better be a strategy to repay it from the referral commissions that you're earning. Because if you don't have the expectation of being able to repay it from your profits of operation, then what's the point? And so I think that any marketing efforts funded by workers need to get funneled back into repaying, basically be a loan from the stakeholders rather than a gift. So I hope that answers the questions.
And is there a way to accomplish this from the BitShares blockchain that you're aware of, or is this something that would have to be built off of the blockchain?
What do you mean, built off the blockchain?
I mean, as far as for somebody who wants to get the initial funds to start up their business, or their BitShares promotional ads or whatever they're going to do, and then to be able to turn around and pay it back. The one issue I see is some people will fail, and what happens then?
They will fail, then they default on their debt, and that's just the end of the story. It's an unsecured loan. And that's fine. If you trust the person and they made the best effort and they still weren't able to pay it back, then okay, you lost for trusting the wrong person and believing in their plan. And that's something that all the stakeholders would have to decide. Do we want to take a risk with this person? And that's what everyone's doing. So I think someone said that the workers are the marketers, and I completely disagree with that. The workers are intended to be people that are producing core infrastructure. They're the ones that implement the proposals for new features, right? There's no direct way to get a referral income stream by implementing new features. They're the ones that upgrade the network infrastructure, to support more transaction throughput and lower bandwidth requirements and lower latencies. They build the roads. They do not go out there and market and try to refer users. That's what the referral program is for.
So really what it comes down to is if you trust these people, you go into it just like you do with any loan with somebody that I've learned anyway in my life. If you loan money to somebody who asks you and you have no documentation or anything, you just expect not to receive the money back. So you go into these loans with the perspective of, even if this doesn't get paid back, this is something I believe in enough that it's okay. Otherwise, you're probably not going to vote on these people.
Yeah, it's a matter of the campaigning that you do. And, you're kind of putting out a pseudo contract in terms of running for a delegate position in the future. These French folks, they've done a lot of work, so that's a step in their favor. But their business plan has to say what their burn rate's going to be, what the payoff's going to be, and that gives the substance of what the shareholders will vote on. And if that's a bad risk, the shareholders are responsible for that. And if they are on the losing end of it, so be it. But everything was disclosed. It's a more formalized way of putting a more or less a business plan out for each of these proposals, each of these ideas.
I had a question regarding the first one, the witnesses. Specifically, you said it was a fixed income stream. Am I correct? Or that?
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to the adjustment of the supply of BitShares, does that adjust as well? Does their fixed income adjust as well according to the supply of BitShares in the ecosystem, so to speak?
The way we're going forward is that the transaction fees and parameters are going to be set by delegates. Right now, the delegates kind of implicitly set them, and then there's all this uncertainty around how much do I need to pay and how long it's going to take to get included. Going forward, the delegates will explicitly set them. The shareholders will approve changes. So fees are going to be fixed and determined. And just like the delegates set the fees, they also set the pay. So if the pay is too low, witnesses are going to start shutting down and say, hey, I can't operate a node for these costs. And the shareholders are going to have to work with the delegates to increase the pay that the witnesses receive. But it's more or less like, here's a budget. This is what we're willing to pay someone to run a node right now. If the budget's too low, no one's going to campaign to be a witness. If it's too high, then we're going to get a lot of witnesses that enter the system. And the shareholders and the delegates need to manage the supply and demand of witnesses versus costs.
Okay. One more question in regards to, just so I understand how the new setup is going to look. So for the witnesses, it's more so an admin task where they are setting up the communications between everybody and making sure that transactions are moving through. The delegates are the ones that are approving all changes and any different inputs that might need moving, and the workers are the ones implementing new ideas that the community wants. Am I correct?
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
And the referral system is the new marketing arm.
Does everybody feel pretty comfortable with this week's Hangout? Do you feel like there's anything that hasn't been covered that we need to cover?
Well, I will say for myself that I'm grateful for all the work that's been going on, and I'm very grateful for this session because it's alleviated a lot of my concerns, and I'm hoping that what's about to happen in the next couple of weeks is going to pay off. I still have some skeptical perspectives because of the past experiences of what's been promised and what's been delivered, but in general, some of those fears have been alleviated today because of what Bytemaster first said.
I have a couple questions on where the Light wallet is in terms of development. When are we expecting a day for that to release?
Nathan has been temporarily pulled off of Light wallet duties because we have so much work to be done on the core blockchain technology. So that's what he's been working on. But I can say that the reason why we postponed Light wallet development is the same reason. We've got some major performance issues with Bitshares that make Light wallets expensive to maintain and operate, particularly if you have a whole lot of users using your Light wallet. The number of RPC requests that come in and the rate at which we can respond to database queries is just too slow. James Caffey told me that in order to service the small user base that we have for wallet.bitshares.org, just beta testing, we have 4 servers servicing RPC requests just to keep it responsive. And that system was not sustainable or scalable. And so we had to go back and re-architect things. So that's what we've been doing, is we've been working on the core server side things to make Light wallets the preferred method. And going forward, that is going to be the focus is on the Light wallets, because if we ever want to get to the scale of Visa or MasterCard, no one's going to want to run a full node. And so we need to design for Light wallets. And that's what we've been doing. So when I mentioned some API changes, we're moving over to WebSockets, which allows us to push notifications from the server to the clients. And the clients no longer have to poll for information. And that makes a huge difference in both the responsiveness. Clients get updates immediately without any delay, as well as the workload. The server and client aren't doing anything unless there's something that needs to be done. So all those things dramatically increase the performance, as well as the fact that we've got the new database infrastructure we've been working on that is much faster. So I guess that's where we are there. Someone asked about the user interface, and I'd like to take an opportunity to address that. User interfaces are hard. We currently have 3 people working on a user interface. Valentine, actually 2 people, SVK and Valentine. And SVK is only part-time, so it's kind of like 1.5 people working on the user interface. James Caffey's working on the JavaScript version of the protocol, which is necessary for web browsers. So building a solid interface takes a lot of time, and making it easy to use takes even longer. And there's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to be done on the interface side to make sure the interface is responsive and able to handle things. So we recognize the need to have a user-friendly interface. And we know a lot of things that go into making it user-friendly. It's not that we don't know how to make things user-friendly. It's more of a time, scheduling, financial situation. But with the new system that's coming out that we're working on, with the referral program in place, there is going to be huge incentives for people to create services like blockchain.info and hosted wallets and light wallets, because all of these wallet providers are going to be the ones that end up signing on new users. And they're going to be the ones that get to claim the referral fees. So we are using the referral system as a means of financing and creating competition in the user interface space. And our goal is that the market will evolve to produce the easiest to use interface, because whoever has this easiest interface, they're going to be the ones that can end up signing up the most users, and they're going to get the vast majority of the referral credit. And it allows you to have a business and build a business around it. So Moonstone will be in a far better position with a proper referral system in place, because if they produce a beautiful interface that everyone loves, they are going to end up signing up the majority of users, and everyone's going to adopt them for the front end. And they won't have to come to the shareholders and ask for blessing to do this. They see a market opportunity. They see that, Valentine and SVK have produced one interface that's functional but is not as usable as it could be. They go in there and offer a competitive offer. This will create decentralization and resilience on the wallet provider, and that's what we want.
Yes, that actually does answer my question very well. Actually, I'm a little bit disappointed that the light wallet's no longer in production, but I see where it's a long-term mindset, and you're hoping to go ahead and build more of an ecosystem within it. And I understand where you're going with this. One more question I had, and I asked it on the forums. I noticed on the news of Ethereum jumping on to BlockNet and using their XBridge software. And I thought that this would actually be the perfect area for Bitshares to go ahead and integrate into, because one of the things that we're trading derivatives of with our user-issued assets. But these user-issued assets, if we can't actually trade them for the real thing with an actual gateway, then there's no point, really. I mean, we want the ease of use and the ease of the interface. I think that one thing that we could do there is go ahead and connect through those. Is there any plans to go ahead, or have you looked into at all using that?
There are so many projects out there that I'd love the opportunity to look into, but for the past 3 months I have been heads down laying a foundation for the long-term success of our platform. And before we can integrate with them, we have to have all of our changes to our APIs and all of the changes to our protocol ironed out, so that we can have a stable 1.0. So yes, we've delayed 1.0 significantly, but what we're doing with 1.0 is so far beyond anything anyone would have expected 6 months ago that I think everyone will find it was worth the wait. We wouldn't have wanted to maintain or support a 1.0 product based upon what we had 6 months ago.
One concern I have with regard to going forward is your statement about the user interface resources that are being applied. I mean, you're talking about a lot of features, and how can those features see the light of day without some user interface to access them? So I'm really puzzled as to the lack of resources in that regard. I do understand the need to have the back end solid, because you can't build a good user interface if you have a shoddy and not well thought out back end. So could you speak to the divide between the resources necessary to make this next big thing working both on the user interface side as well as the back-end side?
It's all about, we're going to be shifting developer resources to user interface once we get the back-end polished off. The other thing we're doing is we're structuring a lot of the challenges that we face in our user interface are a consequence of decisions made about the way transactions are structured and the way data is organized in the client. And it becomes a lot easier to build user interfaces if the data is organized and the API is right, and you have the information you need to interpret it. Valentine had to do a lot of work to accurately reflect the status of the order book in Bitshares. SGK is probably also familiar with this. You've got shorts and you've got all these implied orders that don't exist because they're expired, so now that means they're at the feed. And you end up mirroring a lot of the back-end logic in the UI, just trying to represent what the back-end is going to do. And a lot of our user interface bugs or issues result from a disconnect where what the UI developers think's going on is different from what's actually going on, and then that causes bad user experiences. So we have been working very hard to remove that disconnect so that the UI is mostly focused on presenting data. And it doesn't have to evaluate or think about the data it's presenting, it just displays it. And that's going to make a huge difference. And the other thing we're doing is we're making the transactions easier to construct. Right now it's extremely difficult to construct transactions, and there's a lot of moving parts with balance IDs and things, and we're really working hard on that to make that a whole lot easier for everyone to understand. So I can tell you the protocol is going to be easier to understand than ever.
That sounds good. Now, is the performance enhancements that you're about to roll out in the back end related to implementation of the object graph, or is the object graph yet another animal in the distant future?
The concept of object graph is foundational to performance gains.
Excellent.
Well, with that said, I think we are running a little bit over, but that's fine. We tend to do that with Bytemaster, don't we?
I would like to, I guess if you have someone scheduled right after me, I can go, but there's one other thing I'd like to discuss regarding Bit Assets 2.0.
Sure, go ahead.
There's been a lot of discussion about redeeming at the feed and forced redemptions, forced settlement. And I think there's a general consensus that if you have forced settlement at the price feed, no short is going to be willing to short near the price feed. There's going to be a premium above the price feed, and that premium is going to vary. I think that's been more or less established, that the premium can't get too high, short, because longs won't buy, but it's going to be some premium above the price feed. And there's a lot of people out there that have expressed concerns about it being above the price feed, or having this variable premium where you don't know, is it going to be worth $1 today or not. And I wanted to address that because it had some insight on exactly what's going on there, and having a solution that allows it to always be worth exactly $1 with a very small margin of error without having to change the proposed system much at all. In markets, we have a situation where if you fix one thing, something else is going to move. And in this case, if you fix the forced settlement price to the price feed, then what's going to move is the premium. But if you have a fee associated with it, so forced settlement happens at, price feed minus 1% or minus 2%, and you dynamically adjust the fee to respond to changes in the premium, then you can have a changing fee for forced redemption, but the price at which the market's actually trading at can be always tied directly to the dollar, regardless of your market conditions. And so those are your two options. You either allow the market to set the premium, or you allow the feed producers to tweak the fee to negate the premium. And one is kind of a price fixing approach where it has manual intervention, and the other is a market-based approach. And it becomes entirely an issue of whether or not you want to have an asset that's always going to be exactly $1, or whether or not you want an asset that's always worth at least $1. Either way, you're taking on the same risk. You're taking on the risk that the fee is going to change, or the premium is going to change. The only difference is what does what does it trade at the internal market? Does it trade at $1, or does it trade above $1? Fortunately, with privatized bid assets, we can have both systems in play at the same time and see which one the market prefers. I don't know which will be better. My suspicions are that it's better to allow the market to set the premium and to have predictable rules, and allow the premium to be added incentive to accept it at face value. But I'm sure there are people that are going to disagree that no, it would be better to have it exactly at $1 at all times with no other incentives. And we can now try both. I just wanted to mention that it's this dynamically adjusting the fee can also be seen as dynamically adjusting an interest rate as a way of stabilizing prices, and adjusting for changes in supply and demand for a particular bid asset and leverage. So I wanted your thoughts on that, and I just wanted that to be on the record.
I guess my question would be, do you think that the market itself is deep enough to test those waters right now to see which one will be more well accepted?
I think because there's financial incentive to create assets and market them and get people to trade them, that if you think that we're wrong, you don't have to go and implement a whole new blockchain to try out your idea. You just use our blockchain, and then you have your asset become the predominant one. So we're lowering the barrier to entry for trying out these different sets of parameters. And when someone gets the parameters right, the depth will form. It's like searching for the resonance frequency. You've got to find out what resonates with the market. And when you hit it, it's going to take off.
And then you're going to have that model be replicated, most likely, across the board.
Yes. Yes. Whoever finds the magic set of parameters, does the market prefer freedom or does it prefer price controls? I guess is what it's going to come down to. And does it prefer trusting the market to set fees, or does it prefer trusting an individual to take up the slack? And either way, it's possible to do it. That said, someone asked about yield on bid assets and whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think that's a parameter that should be tweakable. Yield has a lot of complicating factors. How do you pay it out in any kind of sensible way that's both sustainable and not arbitrary? Right? The yield system we have now is this convoluted way of approximating a return, but it's not you can't say it's this interest rate. And I'm thinking that if you allow the asset issuers to have the ability to set a yield, set an interest rate that's going to charge shorts, and turn around and set another interest rate that it's going to pay longs, and they are free to change that interest rate to respond to changes in supply and demand, then you have a system where it's very predictable and you've got all the controls you have today. You don't have shorts bidding on interest rate. We have this, the problem with the current system is that we've socialized the yield returns, but privatized paying of interest. The different shorts pay different interest rates, but all the longs get the same thing. And what we need is all shorts paying the same interest rate and all longs receiving the same interest rate at all times. And then it's just a matter of how do you set the interest rate. And the bond market is one way of setting interest rates that are a free market approach. But if you wanted to have an interest rate on holding the main bid asset, then it would have to be a property of the asset that could be changed by the issuer. And so that is the idea for it, and be interested to see what everyone thinks about it.
I have one last question about the witness role again. Now, will all witnesses be paid the same, whatever the delegates propose, or whatever the shareholders approve of, or will there be a difference between each witness, because each witness brings different skills? Now, if each of the skill sets that are brought to the table have to support some minimum set, and that's what you're paying for is a minimum set, then that equalizes things, and that's reasonable. But could you address that for me, Bytemaster?
Yeah, the witness roles should all be identical. Run a server, produce blocks on time, and be unbiased in the inclusion of transactions. And there's a fixed budget that the blockchain's willing to pay for that, and witnesses compete based upon who's able to actually do that for the lowest cost and therefore make the highest profit.
Thank you. That clarifies it perfectly.
Thank you, Bytemaster, for always showing up, and thank you to all of you in the community who join us to ask these questions and to kind of form a very important core to the Bitshares community. I personally appreciate all of you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. See you guys next week.